So welcome again, DiCara. It's really great to see you here. I'm really excited about our conversation, and I hope that we can unveil some of the secrets of karma as regards astrology. This is a subject that I've grappled with for decades. I've studied Buddhism and yoga and Advaita Vedanta and so many different paths that describe karma. And it's worth our listeners knowing that Hinduism, Buddhism, Jainism, all subscribe to karma, although they come at it with a slightly different approach. It's not, there's no dispute about the karma itself, it's the way that it fits into the philosophy that is slightly different. So we'll have a look at that because there's a lot of things that are confusing, and especially in pop culture. I think maybe we can touch on dharma as well with regards to karma. I think that could be really helpful because that's another word that people don't seem to understand, and I think it's really helpful to understand because it gives us a context, especially when we're looking at an astrology chart. So, Vic, what would you like to say about karma, and how would you like to start our conversation here?
Thank you for having me,
Thank you for
and
joining me.
I would rather have you start.
Okay, okay.
Yeah.
So the three types of karma are the thing that interests me. I'm going to just pull up the notes so that I can read the definition, because this is something that we can at least work from the definition of the three different kinds of karma, and then we can extract different ideas. So prarabdha karma is the karma that we experience here and now. This is our life. This is often considered to be what brought us to this point in life, and it's a part of sanchita karma, which is the sum total of the past of our lives as well as other experiences of life. For example, I am here as a Caucasian woman. This I did not control that. I can't possibly change the fact that I'm white. I'm a meter 66 tall. This is something I don't have any choice around. I will never be 2 meters tall. That's my sanchita karma. And the prarabdha karma is, what do I do with this frame? What do I do with this body? Do I dye my hair? Do I get fat? Do I get skinny? I can change elements of who I am, but I can't change fundamentally that. And then we have kriyamana or agami karma, which is the karma that we're doing right now. Whatever we do in this moment is bringing a future moment, and it's contributing to a future. And then all of that coming together is how we experience this present moment. So it crystallizes in what we understand about now, but there's multi layers of karma. So it's not that there's some punishment or some reason that this is happening to me. It's all a very complex web of events, some of which I've controlled, some of which I have not controlled from the past and from this present action. What do I do with that? One great example I find for people who are not really understanding that is issues around trauma. We can't help what happens to us. If we have loss or some kind of shock in life, that's an event that happens. We didn't necessarily create that event, but we can control and decide how we respond to the event. And so these two karmas intersecting creates then the future, or the present going towards the future, that we can experience. So what are your thoughts on that?
Okay. I think different people break karma down in different ways to try to help people understand it. So you get ideas of three types of karma or five types or whatever.
Mhm.
Let's do it. Let's start. Let's do it ourselves today. I think it's very important to understand that ideas are expressed in words. So if you understand the words carefully, then you'll understand the idea. But if we are lazy about the words, then we won't understand the idea really. So karma is a word that's made from a seed word called krit. And krit means an action, to do something. So karma has to do with doing something. This is the thing about karma which makes it different from other ideas of fate. The other ideas of fate, we generally don't hear about why. All we hear about is this is going to happen, this is supposed to happen. But they don't really, those words like fate or destiny, they don't speak anything about why this is supposed to happen a certain way. But in the word karma, the idea is that it's an action has happened.
Mm.
So since this is basically what we're talking about when we talk about karma, we could use really simple models to explain it. Like you can just explain the act of pushing a ball. So when the act of pushing the ball is the kartā, that's the action. And then the person who pushes the ball is the kartā. And then the ball rolling is the karma. And then the place that it rolls to is the kartā.
No, that's the person.
Karna, or some karya. It's the karya. It's the effect.
Mm-hmm.
So in English, you have the action, the actor, the energy of the action, and then the effect of the action.
Mm.
So what karma actually refers to is the energy of the action. So like pushing up, like in physics, we have a concept of potential energy and kinetic energy. So if I raise a ball up to here, then I've increased its potential energy. And that's also like the aparabdha karma.
Mm.
It's the karma is in this ball now, but it hasn't really come true yet.
Mm. Could we call that a natal chart? Could we describe that, the natal chart? No.
On a small scale, yes, but on a large scale, the natal chart is already the dropping of the ball.
Okay.
And then when you drop the ball, then that kinetic energy is like the karma. But the transition from holding the ball up to dropping the ball down, we don't have that concept in physics. And that's the concept of karma, is the transition from a cause to an effect.
Okay.
And so it includes the cause and the effect, but it's the transition state. So
but
I
then
was watching.
Let's back up just a second.
Sure.
So how did the ball appear? Like, how did we get to the point where we're holding a ball?
Why do you ask these difficult questions?
Because this also, like the fact that I'm born, you by coincidence, we're both born in the United States. Neither of us have ended up anywhere near where we were born. And so there's some cause that just landed us there, and another cause that pushed us to go somewhere else.
Okay, so let's say, why did I wind up with a ball and not a triangle?
Yeah.
Somebody must have pushed a ball towards me, right?
But who? Then
the ball must have come into my room, right? Why?
Yeah.
Because somebody pushed the ball towards me. But who is that somebody?
Yeah, that's the question.
It must have been me.
That you pushed the ball towards you.
Yeah.
You attracted the ball.
I've pushed the ball, but I exist.
Right.
I exist in the past, present, and future.
Mm-hmm.
So I push the ball in the past, and in the future I receive the ball. And I pick it up and I drop it.
Mm.
That's another thing that's important about the Vedic concept of fate, which is kind of unique to the Vedic concept of fate, which is it's not Zeus who decides what happens to me.
Right.
It's me that decides what happens to me.
Right.
And Zeus is the guy that makes sure that it happens.
We can just pause on that distinction, because in the Greco-Roman distinction of fate, it's actually gods doing this. It's the three goddesses of fate that are deciding. So that means that there's some kind of willfulness on the part of spirit, or on the part of God, on the part of a god or goddesses. And this is very different in the Hindu or Vedantic general yogic way of looking at these concepts. For Buddhism, although Buddhism extracts even that notion of a separate God. Like in the notion in Buddhism is of what my teacher calls no coming, no going, which means that we are a continuum. There's a continuum, there's no established separate self. And this is where we are just simply a constant shift from one form, from one way of being to another. And it's about conditions and causes that creates this moment. And similarly, future moments will be caused and created based on whether or not the causes and conditions are right, but otherwise not. So like you're talking about the potential of dropping the ball. or the potential that the height of the ball creates. And this is that understanding of causes and conditions. We don't necessarily always get the right causes and conditions. If I bring this back to a birth chart, like I've seen, for example, charts where people have enormous potential. I met a woman who was in her 70s. She was the mother of a client of mine, so I knew a lot of the context of the family. I was absolutely sure this woman was just some kind of dynamo. She looked like she had this brilliant career, that she was incredibly powerful. The chart just had so much promise. And when I met her, she was almost defeated. Her whole life had been sort of passed by, and she had had a very difficult divorce about 40 years earlier, and it marked her. And she never did anything really. Like she just kind of kept going day by day. And it was that event, that's like 8 or 9 years ago, that really got me to think, what is guaranteed in a chart? Like what is fated, if we can call it fated, and what is just our choice, and how do we engage with that? So sorry, I think I'm going a little off track here, but this is the stuff that keeps me up at night. this is
Mm.
this is the stuff I don't understand.
Mm. Well, what I think an astrology chart is a map to try to understand the trajectories of the karma
Mhm.
that are bearing fruit in this life. So just like I might not be not everybody reads a map well
Mhm.
or accurately. So often we get lost. I mean, especially me, I'm really bad with maps.
Mm.
Often I get lost even with my Google, map on my phone.
Right.
So it's not guaranteed that just because something looks a certain way in the chart, that's the way it actually is, because these maps are very complicated.
Mm, mm.
So even if we say, how come this woman looks like she's supposed to be a super dynamo, but she wasn't? Maybe we just misread the map. That's another
Mhm.
possibility too.
Yeah.
Maybe well, and then the other thing is, it is a map for your birth. So actually, I was watching one of my favorite television shows, which is this 1988 Indian television series of Mahabharata. It's a
Oh, yes, yes,
television
I know it
serialization
well.
of
Yeah,
Mahabharata.
it was every Wednesday night for, like, ever, yeah.
Sunday, I think it was. I don't know.
Oh,
Yeah,
was it Sunday? Yeah, maybe Sunday, yeah.
yeah. So in it, they have Krishna says something like, "You don't think about the past. Don't think about the past, because that happened,
Mhm,
and it already happened. And no matter how much you think about it, it's not going to not happen.
mhm,
But what you have to think about is, what are you going to do now?
right.
Now that that's happened, what are you going to do?"
Mhm,
So that's another aspect of karma that's interesting. It's not a concept of, since we are the architects of the momentum that forms our karma, we never stop being the architects of it.
right,
So we
right.
keep interacting with it.
This is
So even
probably what New Age people describe as co-creation, right? This would be that concept of co-creation.
I guess so. Yes. So sometimes
Forward.
people are born under certain circumstances,
Mhm,
but they really work with that in a different
mm,
way than is expected. There's also that possibility.
mm, mm. So then from a karmic point of view, this is what confuses me. It's like, is that meant to happen? Is that, is this something, like one of the things that people often say is it's kismet, it's destiny. This is what had to happen. You had to go to this place. I'll give you an example. This is why I'm so confused. When I was about 20, I went to a palm reader. Yeah, I was in Toronto. I was studying in Toronto, and uh, Krishna Chawla, he was called, and he was extraordinary. I went in as neutrally as possible. I took off, thinking I take off all my jewelry and wear a really simple T-shirt. He won't know anything about me. And he read my palm and described things that, at the age of 57 now, have all come to fruition, like literally all of them. Things that were impossible to just randomly select, and so then the question is, well, that's in my hand. Like that, what the hell? How is that even possible? And we see the same kinds of things coming through the birth chart. You know, the resemblance of the what he described in the hand is there in the birth chart as well. And so, and then described by transits. It's like the impulses are the transits, and working with the transits, how we respond, let's say, to the transits. And so this is what I'm trying to grapple with. You know, it's like how do we get to that point where at the age of 20, some total stranger can tell me these things will happen. And it's not stuff that I can then say, okay, I'm going to make that happen. You know, he said things like, you will have foreign husbands, too. Then he told me to forget that he said that. He said, we're living in 5 different countries. At that point, I had been living in 2 because I was born in the US and raised in Canada. But still, I'm on my 5th country. And this is things that happened that drew me in this direction, but not me saying, oh, he told me I should move, you know, to go to my 4th
Mm,
or 5th country, you know. So this is the thing that I'm trying to grapple with. How much am I involved in this choice? And how
mm.
much is that choice just making me do it? You know, or the pre-selected sort of me
Yeah.
making me just show up and do this thing.
Yeah, I find that very interesting too. And I have something to say about that.
Okay.
And it also has to do with how complicated life is too, because we don't live in a vacuum.
Mm,
So we're living with all these other people, and our actions and also our success and failure affects the people that we're connected with.
mm,
So it's extremely a delicate system. Karma is an extremely delicate system.
mm,
So the best that I can grasp, the way the engineers of the universe have designed it, is
mm,
that they kind of put it into these discrete blocks called lifetimes,
mm,
where you are not really able to change that much
mhm,
within that particular lifetime. But but nonetheless, your deeds have a huge effect on your karma, but not always a huge effect on your karma in that lifetime.
right. Yeah, and the rest we
So
don't know then. We
yeah,
just
so this actually, I think if you had a person who is an impeccable reader of the karmic map,
mm,
they could probably tell me how many times I would blink today.
right, that'd be impressive. Uh-huh.
If they were really, really perfect at reading the map. I think the astrological gears and the karmic gears are that detailed.
Mm,
And then somebody would say, well, then you don't have any free will. It's
mhm,
not that I don't have free will. I have free will.
mhm,
But the effects of like if a train is moving at 80 miles an hour on a train track,
mm,
there's no doubt that it's going to be in a certain place at a certain time.
right. We can anticipate
That
something.
doesn't mean that the driver doesn't have will and can't change the speed. It doesn't
Mm,
mean that something might might not change, but the change would happen in some later frame
mhm,
when it's possible to change, when the
mm,
momentum has changed. So I think that there's these discrete things called lifetimes, and that's part of the real purpose for having reincarnation and lifetimes is that how can I made a big change in my karma because of the things that I've done in my lifetime. I've made huge changes. Well, how can I have huge changes? I still have the same parents.
mhm.
I still have the same body. I still have the same brain that I was born with. How can these huge changes affect me? Bam, have a new life.
Right,
Have
right.
a new birth, become a new person, go to a new
Mm,
loka.
mm, mm, mm. And thus
So
the
I
importance of right action and the Dharma, the way that we're understanding how important it is to act in accordance with what is good, what is right, what is fair, so that we're not creating some problematic future for ourselves or other people. Um, Maybe if we could talk about Dharma and this at this point, this is something that I find people mix up a lot with karma because Dharma is often in the West, it's often seen as something that is your one and only purpose. Like there's this thing that you're here for. You're here for a reason, and you hear that a lot. You're here for a reason, and it was one of the most freeing things for me to realize that there was no specific purpose to my life. That I could create multitudes of purposes and they would change. And at some point, my Dharma was being a student, and at another point, it was being a wife and then having children and looking after them, come what may. And And then it becomes, branching out into a career, branching out into a different career. That's all dharma. And it's all kind of the foundation of all of that is how I do that, which is another form of dharma, the understanding of the righteousness or the right way of being in that context. But it's not about trying to find that singular thing that you're here for, like that big one shining star that is going to make you happy, which I think is what the New Age movement kind of pushes in terms of that idea. Do you have any comments about that, or how it can
Sure.
tie into karma, especially?
Dharma and karma are very inseparable. And most of the definitions of karma have to do with dharma, like most of the classical definitions.
Can you give an
And then
example?
there's,
Can you give an example?
give me a second. I'll find it. I might need my glasses here. So, for example, Jaimini Sutra. Jaimini Sutra is the sutra for Mimamsaka Darshan, where it explains what all the words and everything are in Shastra. It says, Chodana Lakshanota Dharma. And the commentary is that this is a definition of karma, and that the word dharma actually means karma.
They equate it.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
And it says that the dharma is something which produces a good result and has a sense of being something that you're supposed to do. That's the definition of dharma. So that you can see why it's interchangeable with karma, because it's something which will produce a result, something which will have an effect. So the whole concept then is, if this action is good, then it produces a good effect, and if the action is bad, then it produces a bad effect. But the word dharma itself gives you the clue to answer the question of how you know if something is good or bad.
So it's
because the etymology of the word
dharma.
The etymology of the word dharma means property.
Right.
So a dharma is a quality of a dharmi, a substance. So like wetness is a quality of water.
Right.
Wetness
It's
is a dharma.
like what is ours? What is ours to do, or to use, or to create? Right.
Yeah, it's sort of like saying you are a mom. So that is your dharma, is that you're a mom. Therefore, your karma is to feed, clothe, educate, protect.
Right.
The child. So there's inseparability between dharma and karma, and that's why karma also there's another 3 ways of defining karma: is karma, vikarma, and akarma. Karma in the sense of this is an action that you should have done. You were right in doing this action. This action is something that, if you're a screwdriver, then you're screwing those screws was a good act.
Right. It was
because you're a screwdriver. But if you're a hammer, then you're trying to screw screws was a bad act.
Right. Right.
And so it will produce a bad effect. You'll ruin the wood if you're a hammer trying to put the screws in. But if you're a screwdriver, you'll produce a good effect. And then there's the concept of akarma, which means not doing anything, which Krishna says is also divided into 2 things. It can be good to not do something, or it can be bad to not do something.
Right. But then
don't do something you should have done, that's bad.
Right. That's adharmic. And then you have the not doing anything, which is actually another choice, which is then karmic.
Yeah.
Right.
So, dharma is an interesting thing. It means, it changes based on what you are. So there's a concept of Sanatana Dharma versus Naimittic Dharma. The dharmas which are permanent, versus the dharmas which are incidental, or incidental, like coincidental.
Right.
Because I enrolled in this school, now I am a student, so it's my dharma to study this from this teacher at this school.
Right. So it's
and
temporal.
if I don't do that, that's going to lead to a bad result.
Right. So Sanatana Dharma is the truth. It's like absolute truth that we can rely on, and the temporal Dharma is something that's just showing up right now.
The concept of Sanatana Dharma is that there's some property to you that doesn't change ever. Like there's other properties which change sometimes over the course of your life. Now I'm 5 years old, next time I'm 10 years old, and I'm 15. That always changes, so I have different dharmas depending on my age. but I'm always a human for this whole lifetime. So what are the humans should learn language, and speak, because that's our asset.
Mhm.
So that's a more permanent dharma, and therefore it's more important. So that the dharmas of my temporary dharma should never override or supersede the more longer term dharmas.
Because we could almost describe them as universal. The Sanatana Dharma is more universal. It affects all of us, right?
Yeah.
It's what we do that affects all of us.
And it's just simply more important because it's deeper down to what we are. It's less incidental. The self has so many different layers of what it is, and some of the layers are very incidental. They change all the time, but some don't. So the more that we get involved with doing the deeds that are truly a part of what we truly are, the more that we get our reactions and our results that reinforce that, what we truly are. And it puts us into the world of what we truly and really are.
Mhm.
So the concept of Sanatana Dharma is that, well, you're an Atma, you're Atma. So you should do actions that are relevant to Atma
Mhm.
and Paramatma and not just worldly actions.
So in a way, this ties into our previous talk about the Kali Yuga, which is that this is what is confused and lacking in our kind of social structure nowadays, where the understanding of our universal dharma or the Sanatana Dharma, the acting from truth, acting from what the Buddha would call right livelihood, right action, right speech, etc. The Noble Eightfold Path. That all of that is skewed now in this Kali Yuga, and so then we get much more of the temporal version of dharma. That I want this, more driven from the ego. I want this, like I want the certificate, so I do the course. But it doesn't necessarily mean it's in everybody's benefit. It's more. My perception is it's more selfish. It's more like self-driven, and then we, by definition, then we create more karma, if I can say that, by being selfish. We're now no longer engaging on behalf of everybody. We're not thinking in terms of other consequences of our choices. More and more, this is happening, and then we find that the results are horrible, and this is what a lot of times people describe as unintended consequences, people naively or innocently doing something that ends up having catastrophic consequences. Social media comes to mind.
Mm.
So this kind of thing, of course, it's good as well. Social media can be very good as well, but it has also unleashed a whole new can of worms. So yeah, that was just a thought that came up, because I feel like this is the underlying problem with the Kali Yuga that we're dealing with. That we've misunderstood our dharma, misunderstood this.
Something interesting just came to my mind too. It's that relationship between karma and dharma also reflects on astrology. Everybody talks about astrology being predictive or descriptive, right? But it's both, because karma and dharma are inseparable.
Right. Now
You
that
can't,
makes it clear. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, you can't describe the predictive stuff without knowing the nature.
Right.
So really, the astrological chart, like I said before, if somebody was like Brahma, some type of a demigod, type of intelligence, they could probably read my chart so well that they could predict the next word that I was going to say.
Mhm.
But oh, that would be using the astrology chart to predict the karmas, right?
Mhm.
But they could also use that same information to predict the dharmas,
Mhm.
so they could tell me really what I'm like.
Mhm.
And there's no difference really between knowing exactly what I'm like and knowing what the next word is that I'm going to say. And that's what I think that's how I find astrology is used usefully,
Right. Right.
because we have a lot of confusion actually about what am I?
Mhm.
Because there's so many voices telling us what we should be, what we are, what we probably are, what
Mhm.
we probably should be. You should probably be, you shouldn't, being a mom is not cool anymore. Or who wants to be a dad?
Mhm.
Or don't be a student, be a teacher, or all these kind of things.
Mhm.
But we're not really sure about who we are. Am I really a child now? I'm 16.
Mhm.
How much should I still depend on my parents? Like this, it's confusing. And what astrology does really well, I feel, is just gives you this impartial, hopefully. I mean, if you can read it yourself, then it gives you this like impartial information. This is who you are. This is your Dharma.
Yeah.
This describes you, and therefore you should act like this. You should do these things.
Yeah. I'm not entirely sure that if we read it ourselves, we're impartial. I think
Yeah, I
we
think
look
you're
for
right.
what we want to find, right?
Yeah.
I find the most extraordinary descriptions that people put in the comments, and all based on what their placements are. And just as an aside, I also want to mention for those who ask in the comments when I post a video about moons or some kind of event astrologically, one of the reasons I can't answer those questions is because I need to see your natal chart. I can't tell you what is going to happen when Mars hits your natal sun because I don't know what that looks like in your chart. And so there's a neutral description, which may or may not be useful, but you have to see that the dharma to see what the karma is going to be,
Yeah.
and vice versa. So this is the reason why it's not because I want you to buy a reading. It's because I can't literally tell you anything useful if I have no idea who you already are or
Yeah.
what I call the natal promise is. So yeah,
Yeah. And what you're already saying on YouTube is already the bit of impartial information that they should really be taking. They should put in some effort if they want to
to
know what
learn,
is going
yeah,
to happen when the sun hits their Mars. Then take the information you already told them
yeah,
and
and develop it.
specificize it. Yeah.
This is another problem that often the people who are most fearful around issues of karma and fate and so on are the ones who don't take action on their own behalf, and then they believe that astrology is doing something to them as opposed to informing them of what's going on, or even informing them of what is already there in their nature. And this is something I try constantly to remind people: it's not your you, like you were saying earlier, you are participating in this. You have to also step forward and meet at least halfway to be able, but I do find a lot of people talk a lot about fear and talk a lot about worry about transits and so on, and it's literally the only reason we're afraid is because we're not taking action. That's a single, for me, a
Yeah, I think so.
definition of fear is that you are not taking action, and you can apply that to almost anything, whether it be natally or transits or whatever in your relationships or whatever.
Yeah, I
So,
think actually karma is an important concept for people to understand for that very reason because it's the word. It comes from the word krit,
mm,
which means do. So you need to
mm,
do something. I came up with a like a little slogan recently, which was use astrology to discover, not define yourself,
well, that's nice. Yeah, yeah.
because you define yourself.
Hmm.
And the astrology just shows you how you've been just defining yourself over the past billion lifetimes.
Right. Yeah.
Now, what Krishna said in Mahabharata is that's already done.
Mm, mm,
Now, what are you going to do with it?
hmm. Yeah.
Now, where do you want to go with it? What do you want to do with it? Another handy, like kind of hackneyed or played out, but very useful analogy is the analogy of like a card game where you get the the part where you get the hand from the dealer. It's not in your control,
Right. Yeah.
but the part what you do after you get the cards in your hands is entirely in your control. Otherwise, poker wouldn't be a sport,
Right. Yeah.
right?
It's
So,
it's an interesting teaching device. You see this all the way through the Mahabharata, the dice, rolling the dice. This is very deep
uh,
symbolism of that very notion. This is
mm,
symbolic of our karmic engagements
mm,
and what's not in our control. So, and I just want to, as an aside to what you just said, I just want to also emphasize that we ultimately are here to understand that it's not personal. All of this, none of life is personal. I feel that there's a bigger game going on, and that so often people identify really personally, really strongly with their natal placements. So I get
what do
so
you
many
mean by that?
comments.
It's not personal.
Well, people will literally say things like, "Oh, I'm a Scorpio sun, and therefore I'm like this," or my moon and sun and ascendant combination makes me do this. I can't help it. This will happen, or this is my life. It's a horrible life because I'm a triple Virgo, or whatever. They'll say things like this, and there's too much personal identification with the symbols of astrology. Have I lost you? I'm not sure if my internet is working.
No, I'm still here.
Oh, good. Okay. So yeah, just to remind people that that it's a guide. It's not meant to be descriptive in the sense that you're limited to this. You're not supposed to be restricted by these definitions. You're supposed to take them as an aspect or an element of understanding of who you are, and to fix yourself into a personality type based on different planetary placements is not helpful, because it keeps you in a program that might be the thing that literally takes you away from your dharma, or from something that can be much better.
Yeah, this is funny, I think. Funny in a bad way. The another famous angle on a thing about Vedic astrology is how Indian people always wear the rings and stuff, right?
Mhm.
It's almost comical.
The
Like it's an easy
remedy
thing to
stuff.
make fun of. Like
Hmm.
you got a guy with like 10 rings and 4 earrings on.
Yeah, yeah.
So he's got like every planet covered. Um, but think about that actually. Think about the concept behind it. Although it's been sort of stupefied
Hmm.
into this passive thing of just like you buy something and then it's okay. But think about the idea behind it. The idea behind it is that you can do something about this
Right.
karma.
Yeah, there's an element of decision and choice in wearing a pearl, or wearing I don't know, a yellow sapphire or something if you're too
Yeah.
pure. But there, and that is coming from you choosing this. Of course, that again, coming into Kali Yuga, is very commercialized. So there's a lot of this fear mongering in certain aspects of Indian astrology, and we're going to get hate comments about judging Indian astrology. I'm already ready for them. It's not about judging Indian astrology. It's just about recognizing where things have gone a little off course. There's a lot of fear and a lot of manipulation around what is going to happen to you if you don't do certain things. And it often is enriching for the person who says that you should do these things. And so this we need to be aware of as well. This is less of a feature in Western astrology. But on the other hand, it's very clickbaity as well. If we look at it from a YouTube perspective, the excitement, the fear, Mercury retrograde. Oh my God, Mercury's retrograde. That's clickbait. So it's a similar kind of energy. And so it's like making a
Yeah.
person worry, what's going to go wrong? And then you impel them to learn something, or try and understand something, which is actually not really helpful. It's kind of, for me, I see the equivalency in the West.
Hmm. But the point that I was sort of getting at was, even though this is sort of a comical thing, it actually shows a very important, good concept about how astrology is to be used. With Indian culture, they don't take the chart as this is your doom.
Mm.
They take the chart as this is your this is your fate. This is what's happening to you. What are
Mhm.
you going to do with it?
Mhm. Mhm.
And that's how I take it. Although I don't wear any rings, right, or any kavachas or anything.
Mhm.
But when I think about, for example, my moon is in Gemini in the 6th house, and my sun is in Leo in the 8th house, and I'm a Capricorn ascendant. When I think about that, I get a picture in my mind of what kind of person I am
Mhm.
versus what kind of person I want to be.
Mhm.
And then I know, when you know point A and point B, then you know which direction to move. When you
Right.
don't know point A or point B, then you don't know which direction to move.
Mhm.
So people, I think, I think what you're experiencing, and of course I experience it as well, is people don't want to admit that they have agency,
Mm. It gets
because that is
off the hook.
scary. It's not even nice to be a man, actually, because as men are always like the more agent one, the part two, the one who's the support of the family. It's one of the
Mm.
big drags of being a man is that you have so much goddamn agency.
Yeah, the responsibility. Yeah.
Yeah, so much, like everything is supposed
That's
to
a
be
very
on your
Capricorn
shoulder.
ascendant thing to say, by the way.
What is that?
So that's a very Capricorn ascendant thing to
Oh,
say.
really? Yeah. I mean, I know myself. I was like, I wish I could just get rid of some of this agency,
Yeah,
get some of
yeah,
this rid of some of this responsibility. Let other people do things. Let other people be responsible for me.
yeah, yeah.
But that's that same basic feeling. Is like I just want to be a baby.
Hmm.
What to speak of man, woman? Let's just go back and be babies
Yeah, yeah,
and have our parents take care of us all day long. That's even better.
yeah.
Let somebody take care of me all day long, and if anything bad happens to me, it's their fault.
Right.
That's how we feel. That's how we're approaching life. We don't want to say, I am suffering because I did screwed up things.
Right.
I did things wrong, or I didn't do things that I was supposed to do. because A, that makes us feel bad,
Mm-hmm.
and B, that means I have to do all this work in my life.
I have to be
But guess what,
responsible.
ladies and gentlemen? That's right.
Right. Yes, exactly.
We
And now
did
in the
screw up a
comments,
whole
we're
bunch
going
of
to get
things.
victim blaming comments. This is how this works now, because now the mind in many cases, especially with Westerners, there's an idea that now we're victim blaming, and this is where that the gap is in understanding that taking responsibility is incredibly empowering, and recognizing our part in how things have emerged, how things have happened, recognizing how we've contributed to whatever it is. And that has nothing to do with victim or perpetrator. It has everything to do with how we've showed up all along the way in this process. And
I think the point of victim blaming is that it's evil because it empowers the predator.
yeah.
Victim blaming empowers the predator, or lets the predator off the hook.
Hmm.
But when you understand karma, you're not empowering the predator. You're saying you better take action.
Hmm.
And part of your problem was you didn't protect yourself against predators.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
These predators are out there. You better not become a predator, and you better not make yourself be a sucker for predators, and you better
Right.
watch out.
Hmm. Hmm.
It's not victim blaming,
Yeah. Exactly.
because
It's
I
being
mean,
sensible
who
in
gets the
many ways.
blame? That's the other thing. That's another thing about Mahabharata. Who gets the blame? We don't
Hmm.
even know.
Hmm.
People are baffled. Who's supposed to be blamed for this?
Right.
Is
Yeah.
it because there's a whole chain of people who are blamed, and we share some of the blame for everything that happens to us. But we're not. But we were brought up, and we were raised as a society. The parents, everybody is part of the people that need to be blamed. The perpetrator of the crime is a major person who needs to be blamed
Right.
for the
Yeah.
crime. But what do I have control over?
Hmm.
If somebody comes and stabs me, I the biggest problem was that somebody stabbed me. It's not
Right.
I'm not the biggest problem.
Right.
But what can I do about it?
Hmm.
I can't do anything about that person that stabbed me, because that's a different person, but I could do something about me.
Hmm.
So if I'm gonna go to an astrologer or a self-help person, and he's gonna tell me about everything that's wrong with that person that stabbed me, that doesn't help me at all.
Hmm.
I need to know what is it about me that I can do differently.
Right.
That's
Yeah.
what astrology will help you with.
Yeah, yeah. How to find that personal strength, the force inside to go forward from whatever's going on in the past, right? Yeah, and then that whole issue around who's at fault or who's to blame is misunderstanding the very notion of karma, and this interdependent, or what is the Buddhist word is dependent arising. That we're all doing something that causes something to happen. And then, when people say, oh, X or Y started a war, or X or Y did this, it's like, well, how far back do we want to go? Like, from what day do we want to start examining this? And should we ignore hundreds of years of history? Or, how do you want to point the finger of blame? And there's this great
Right.
expression, which is when you point that finger of blame, you've got these three fingers pointing back at you. And I
Yeah.
like that in terms of karma, because it's really recognizing, well, on the one hand, you're looking outwards for some person to be responsible, or some situation to be responsible for this, and ignoring at the same time that there's an enormous amount that we can do about it, or that we
Yeah.
need to own, that we need to take responsibility for.
Yeah. And
So,
also, I think victim blaming comes in by there's another logical fallacy called misdirection.
okay.
So victim blaming, I think, can only happen when you utilize that fallacy of misdirection. So
Right.
like you could say, Putin attacks Ukraine.
Hmm.
So Putin is the bad guy. He's the evil person. But then somebody's going to come along and say, but NATO crossed the limits, and they did this X, Y, and Z, and that's putting Putin on edge, and that's why Putin attacked NATO. That's why Putin attacks Ukraine.
Hmm.
So does that mean that Putin is fine?
Hmm. Yeah. Both
It
can
means
be
that
true.
Putin is still the bad guy, and also
Yes. Yeah.
NATO is a bad guy.
Yeah.
NATO, but victim blaming would be, and so if you push that all the way back, you'll eventually come to some karma from the people who live in Ukraine.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. There's
Now,
some.
does that mean that it's not Putin's fault? Only if you misdirect and you forget about Putin. The most fault is on the immediate cause, which is Putin.
Right. Yeah.
The secondary thing is on NATO. The tertiary thing is on whoever, whatever, Eisenhower, whoever,
Yeah.
1950s,
Yeah.
past
Mm.
lives, all these past lives of past lives of past lives of all these people.
Yeah. Yeah.
But the fact that I am to blame for everything that happens in my life, and I'm also to credit for everything that happens in my life, also doesn't mean that my mother and father don't get any credit or blame.
Yeah. Yeah.
Doesn't mean that my wife doesn't get any credit or blame. That's, I think, where people get sloppy in the thinking.
Exactly. That's it. I think this is really the core issue, which is actually the core issue that we need to understand in any spiritual practice, is our profoundly interconnected nature, that we cannot extract ourselves out from other elements, which again comes back to this notion of karma. It's all happening all at once, and it's all been happening over time, and it's all going to continue to happen, and we just have this moment where we can have agency, this moment where we can do something about it, and we can't cherry pick the bits that we like or don't like within that, because that's ignoring all of these influences, all the rest of these influences that are impacting us, like you said, in ways that we can't know, because it's mysterious. It's so complex in so many different ways that we cannot know how I got to this point. Like it's just YouTube algorithms brought me to this point. Well, what brought me onto YouTube? So
Mm.
it's like, how did we get here? And we just will never know. And so some questions are not really worth asking because they're distracting us from what we can do right now in this moment, which is our Dharma. So, do you have anything that you want to wrap up with? Anything that we haven't spoken about? I mean, there's a million things that we haven't spoken about, but in
I
terms of,
think maybe I would mention, we didn't really talk too much about the fate versus free
oh yeah,
will thing.
let's have a look at that, because that's really big. Yeah.
Yeah, I have 1 or 2 videos that already are
Okay.
dedicated to this. And I
Okay.
think if somebody would Google free will DiCara or something, you would get that
Okay.
like
And
a
I'll link
top
those
of
below
your.
this one. Then I'll link those videos.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah. So just when you look at the word if you take the word karma and you compare it to words like fate or destiny, like fate means in Latin, it means something that came from a proclamation,
Mm.
fore, something that comes from something somebody said. And so it's either the sense that somebody made this prediction that something would happen, or it's the sense that some divinity or some authority said, do this,
Yeah.
or
This
this
will
must
happen.
happen.
Yeah.
Right. So, and destiny means the thing which has been made stabilized.
Hmm. Mm.
It means the thing that can't be avoided.
So that's me being a Peter
Destiny.
66 and being a Caucasian woman born in the United States. That's
Yeah, like, okay,
part of
now that's
destiny.
stable, that's defined, you can't avoid that. That's the
Yeah.
concept of destiny. So
Yeah.
none of them really say why or where it came from. But since karma comes from the word kri, which means an action, and the person who does the action is you.
Mm.
And if you look another very interesting thing is somewhere in the Vedas, they have a discussion with the personified Vedas about whether or not there's free will.
Mm. Do you know
And
do you know which Veda that is? Do you
I
know
can
which?
find out for you.
Yeah, that'd be
Maybe you could
great.
put it in the description later.
Yeah.
Um, and they say, the personified Vedas say, if there was no freedom of will, then we wouldn't exist. We,
So
the Vedas, wouldn't exist, because all that we are is advice.
Mhm.
We're advice to humans. And if humans are not capable of taking advice and making decisions, then what is the point of us existing? So they say there would be no scriptural statements if there was no free will. There would be no meaning to say, thou shalt not kill,
Right.
if I didn't have a choice to either kill or not kill.
Right.
You don't have to
You
say thou
told.
shalt not kill. You just either program me to kill or to not kill.
Right. Right.
Right. And so that concept of karma, it means there must be a krit, there must be a kartā, there must be somebody who does it. That person is me.
Mhm.
So it's not that free will is something that is different than fate and competes with fate. Free will is the kartā, and fate is the karma, and the destiny or the outcome is I forgot it again, karya, the thing, that the outcome,
Right.
There's a performer, there's the momentum, and then there's the outcome, the ball, the pushingness in the ball, and then the place where the ball winds up.
Mhm.
So the place where the ball winds up is like destiny or fate, and then the pusher of the ball is the free act, the free will. fate gets generated by free will.
Right.
But like, as we know from any sort of momentum, whether whenever you learn how to ride a bike, ride a skateboard, roller skates, walk, run, drive a car, as you know from any sort of momentum, the more that you commit yourself to a direction, you limit your freedom of moving to other directions. So
Right. You've made your choice. Yeah.
yeah, if free will doesn't have to mean you have infinite possibility of choice,
Right. Yeah.
because you've already made certain decisions. So now you're responsible for the momentum of those decisions. And
Right.
you're set on a certain path by those decisions. And we maybe are like more like, instead of kids on a skateboard, we might be like on a freight train going down a mountain,
Hmm. Hmm.
considering how long we've been doing all the things that we've been doing over so many lifetimes, or even just in this one lifetime, how long we've been acting with the same habits and
Right.
reacting with the same habits. It's like a freight train. You can't just say, I must not have free will because I can't stop smoking.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
just the momentum of the habit
Momentum
of
is
needing
strong.
nicotine that feels like you don't have free will, but you do have free will. Now
Yeah.
just use it.
Right.
And the more that you use it, the more you slow down the momentum. And then the slower the momentum of a certain action gets, the easier it is that you can actually change the direction and set momentum in a new direction.
Right. Right. My teacher, Thich Nhat Hanh, would not accept new monastics, applicants to join the monastery as a sannyas or as a monk or nun beyond the age of 50, because for this very reason, because he said the momentum is too strong now. You don't have the capacity at this age. It's such an effort to try and live in community and to live in service. You've had a whatever life, a householder life up until this point. You can't just switch it off. The momentum is so strong. And so this is one of the reasons why people tend to join these organizations younger, because they understand something that they're willing to give up, and then they perpetuate that energy that has good and bad, but it's exactly describing what you've just said. That momentum, the freight train is going, and you can't just decide, oh, I'm going to now jump off the train and take a bike. It doesn't work so easily. You can have moments of awakening and realization, and these are all possibilities, but they're rare, and that would be perhaps karmic as well. But
I would say we can decide that I thought I was going to take this train to Chicago, but I'm going to go to Cincinnati instead. You couldn't say that, but you also have to put in the work
yeah, you
to
have to
slow
do
the train
something.
down
Yeah,
and get off that train, walk over to a new station. You have to put in work to
yeah,
change your
yeah.
work that you've previously done,
That's it, yeah.
but we don't really want to hear that.
No, that's the thing, and this
Yeah.
is what I think people don't realize. Years and years ago when I started practicing yoga, there was a book. I've forgotten the name of the author, from the 60s, 70s, called Yoga, Discipline and Freedom. And it was very engaging, because that's precisely the fact that you have a discipline, the fact that you do something because you have a sense of what is going to help and what is going to be useful going forward, is what gives you freedom. Freedom from ill health, or freedom from confusion, or freedom from overthinking, or whatever. It's the discipline that brings the freedom, and people don't really recognize that, because they think freedom means, I right from the beginning I get choice. It's like a toddler wanting to have ice cream for dinner. Kind of, that's not freedom. That causes some serious problems, down
Hmm.
the line. And so this is that whole, I think, again, Kali Yuga issue, which is that people don't understand the importance of actually restricting certain things, and finding benefit in that, saying no, and saying yes to certain things, and saying no more often to other things.
Hmm.
So, anything else? Any last observations?
No, not a lot of observations.
The last word on karma. Yeah, there's so much to say. I'm really grateful for your time. Thanks a million for showing up again. And
Thank you.
hopefully we'll meet again for some similar topic, because I find these
Yes,
discussions really
I look,
interesting. Thanks
I
a
look
lot.
forward to it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye bye.